Hey guys, this is Dr. Dan coming at you with another video for our elbow fix series. This is going to be for our lateral elbow pain. We're going through a series right now. In this video, we're going to talk about banded activation drills. Since we've already talked about how to massage the area to decrease some pain, stretch the area to loosen up some of the tissue above and below where you're having the pain. Now we're going to talk about specifically how to warm up some of the area using a simple band. Now I'm going to use one of these thin jump stretch bands or these pull-up assist bands, but you could use any kind of TheraBand or tubing that you have at home. Our first drill, we're going to focus on some of the muscles that are closest to the body and making sure that these muscles are doing work and our elbow is not doing all the rest of the work that seems to get taken up by joints that are further away. So to start with this, we're going to go with a palms up grip on a band that's probably about shoulder width apart. I can go a little bit wider if it's too hard to pull from here. But my goal here is to think about squeezing my shoulder blades together and not just moving at my shoulder joint. A lot of people start to move at their shoulder joint and they tend to dump forward and round their shoulders into this position. It's not what we want to do when we pull this band apart. I want to think about pulling my shoulder blades back first and then squeezing together. That's going to give a better contraction for some of the shoulder blade muscles. I can do this even single arm if I need to focus on that drill single arm. If I connect this band, let's say, to a post or a rack, could loop it in there, make sure my hand is either at the front of my shoulder or maybe behind my shoulder blade. That way I can feel some of the connection of those muscles as I'm squeezing the arm backwards across my chest here. So this would be a straight arm, horizontal abduction, or banded pull apart as you might see it. Another drill that's really good to feel connection to the back side of the shoulder blade and the back side of the shoulder and to build up some awareness of these muscles is an external rotation. Even though these are simple, they're great for building awareness and building a pump in the back of these muscles. Now to do this movement, I want to think about most of the work is coming from the blade and then some of it's coming from the back of the delt, maybe a little bit of the infraspinatus and some of the rotator cuff muscles. But I really want to think about keeping tension in the back side and not losing that tension as my arm comes in. So a lot of people, when they do this external rotation movement, they come out and then they let it fall in. They go out and they fall in, right? So I want to keep that shoulder blade back and I want to think about my elbow and shoulder as pivoting on a spot that's centered in my shoulder. I also want to do it with a horizontal resistance. I see this a lot in gyms where people hold a dumbbell or they hold a weight and they go in and out. This is really doing nothing because gravity is just resisting the weight this way. So if anything, you're just working your biceps and you're just rotating your shoulder forward and all the strain is through the front side of the arm. It's not doing anything for the back side of the cuff. Now it would if I have my elbow up and I rotate my arm this way. This would work a little bit more external rotation, but we're talking about what to do with a band. And so if you're going to use a band, make sure you're going horizontal or you're doing some kind of rotation that's going to work the back side of the arm. If you're going to work external rotations, again, you can have that elbow away from the body, but it's simpler to start close to the body. And then as you progress in your strength and capacity, work further away. And as I fatigue, you might notice that I'm using my wrist sometimes a little bit too much to initiate that movement. That's what we want to not do. We want to break those sets and reps up and make sure that I'm not starting at my wrist first, because that's going to allow this elbow to start taking over with some of those extensor muscles to pull that band back. So if you're too weak to do this, find a lighter band or start with a lighter weight and start working just on the shoulder blade movements. Now we also want to talk about different diagonal patterns. Diagonal patterns are great for the shoulder and they're great for any area of the body because it teaches how these muscles really can interact in larger athletic movements that we want to use through life. Now if I'm going diagonal, I'm going to put this band maybe at my foot, take a bigger stance, grab somewhere that my arm can rotate in so I feel a stretch on the back and top side of my shoulder, and then I'm going to open up behind. This is one way if I don't have any anchor points, I could take that band and start working some diagonal patterns from the ground. Now, if I do have the ability to hook it up, it becomes a greater exercise, so I'm just going to hook this up into a strap system that I have set up on the squat rack, go out till I find a position where that resistance is appropriate, and I'm going to let that band pull my arm down and across my body. So I might have to turn so that band resistance goes a little bit further. Then I initiate as if I'm pulling a sword out of my pocket. So I'm doing some larger rotation movements, making sure I'm engaging the muscles on the backside. I can always turn my body in different relations to where I want that resistance to go, or I can wrap that band around my wrist, into my fingers, around my thumb. That way I don't have to grip that band. I can have an open hand, open palm as I do these movements if I notice my grip or my extensors are doing too much. Last but not least, we don't want to forget about the wrist itself. So with the band connected to a post, I'm then going to work just at the elbow. So for the elbow, I want to create a little bit of extension. I want to do this in the pattern that the band is going to be resisting these muscles. In this case, my wrist is going to come down. Then I'm going to work the extensors as I pump the wrist toward you guys or into extension. I can then work the flexors as well if this is too painful or if it's too much. I'm going to turn this way, stabilize the elbow, stabilize the wrist, and pump the flexor muscles the opposite direction. You might notice that there's certain distances you can work within or certain ranges that your wrist may or may not be able to get to. We didn't really talk about how far one direction is better than the other. It really is just dependent on you. Maybe you need to start the resistance here and then only go to neutral. That's an appropriate region as well. Or you may only have to work flexion and go from one way to neutral as well. Depends on the region and that range that your wrist goes to. Work in a pain-free range and then gradually expose that range to larger and larger motions. This has been the band activation series for lateral elbow pain.